Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those people who have their natal Neptune in the first house. I'm very excited to do this series because I really am intrigued by Neptune. I think that Neptune has a lot of influence in our lives, not in the sign that it resides in because it's a generational planet. It will affect people within like 15 years of one another. But what house it's in, and that it can kind of give you some answers as to why certain things seem to happen for you. Also, I would say the aspects to Neptune as well. You can find this out if you've wandered onto this video, because I get some questions sometimes with these types of videos that make me think that a few people may be confused as to what these are all about. You have to know your time of birth in order to find out where Neptune is in your natal chart. So basically, you'll just be constructing a natal chart, and you can get those for free, a chart generator. Astro.com is what I use. I find it very clear. The display very clear, and then you can see where Neptune is, or you could get a private reading with me, and I do this in my natal chart interpretation. So in any case, I'm also going to be doing a video on some of the transits of Neptune in particular signs. Like the first one I'm going to do is Neptune in Libra, and I've been wanting to do this for a while because this is the hippie generation, or what became the hippie generation. Let's put it that way. Early, especially on the early to mid end of things. I think it's 1942 to 1956, somewhere along those lines. And I'll be talking about how it affected that generation. But I'm interested in the Neptune angle because Neptune has a lot of raps, bad raps against it. Like, in other words, illusion, delusion, fantasy, wishful thinking, those kinds of things. And I honestly think that the good qualities of Neptune get short shrift. And I also think that in terms of the negative qualities, some of them really can wreak havoc on a person's life. So I look forward to doing that. Now let's talk about what's going on with Neptune in the first house. Neptune is a ruler of Pisces, and Neptune rules the 12th house. So the 12th house is all about the immaterial side of life. So we look to the opposite sign and opposite house to get that contrast. The opposite sign, Virgo, the opposite house, 6th house. What are the matters of the 6th house? Work or service to others. Your daily routine or how you organize your days. Is your life organized or chaotic? I'm laughing because I have Neptune in the 6th house, so when we get there, I'm going to probably be doing a really long video for that one because it's quite a trip, let me tell you. And the 6th house is also your health, your physical health though. It's an earth house. What element is Pisces? Water. Water is intuitive. Pisces has that in spades. So it's the house of karma. It's the house of self-undoing. And I think this is a big one. This is an important one. Self-undoing. How do we trip ourselves up? How do we hold ourselves back in life? And this is a house of suffering. So it can be guilt, but is it really guilt that is coming from a genuine place? Or is it assumed guilt? Is it assumed guilt like somebody who has a martyr complex, the Christ complex. This is an important one because people who have planets in their natal 12th will often, especially what we would call malefics. I don't really like that term, but like Saturn, for instance, in the 12th. If you have a planet like that, or even like the asteroid Chiron, you may come into this lifetime with this guilt that is illogical, that doesn't have any connection to anything that you have done, been a part of in this particular incarnation. So it's irrational on that level. So because of this, the person with Neptune in the first house is facing a bit of a clash, because what does the first house now? Oh, and I didn't say the 12th house that Neptune rules is the house of seclusion, the house of the monk. Okay, so if we were going to talk about a building that the 12th house would represent, it would probably be like a monastery, I was going to say a cell. It's interesting, the 12th house are prisons and hospitals, and I was going to say cell, but I meant like those cells in monasteries. Is that what they are called? I don't know if that's the thing. There's a movie about monks, and it doesn't have any dialogue. I don't know if anybody saw it. I think it's called Into Great Silence. And I don't know if I watched at least a good portion of the movie. And it's a very meditative. It just kind of like shows them, I think it's in France or something. I don't think it's in the United States. I think it's overseas. And it shows them going about their daily rituals. And I feel like I had a lifetime there. And, in some kind of setting like that. So that's what Neptune represents. But you're talking about it in the first house. So the first house is the house of the self. Is Neptune comfortable in the first house? No. I mean, well, it's comfortable to the extent that it comes into this lifetime with that placement, so it knows how to kind of cope with it. But Neptune is very vulnerable, and especially in the first house, Neptune may feel exposed. Because when planets like the sun, especially if your sun is in the 12th house, you're probably like, oof, on a daily basis, how can I do this? Because you feel like you've got it stamped on your forehead. I am a dreamer. I am not of this world, ethereal. And some of these things, when I look for source material online, my brain is like, wait, I thought I read somewhere that Neptune in the first house is going to lead to water retention. So I'm going to say that, even though I haven't seen it here. One thing that I saw in multiple sites is that the person will have hypnotic eyes. And they even go as far as saying the color of the eyes will be a gray or blue. And I even saw one where it said greenish tint. And in this one site, they were talking about that it's kind of a weird look in the eyes. Okay. I mean, like it's kind of a strange expression or just something about it. And what I was thinking of was Madame Blavatsky, if you know who she was, and the Theosophist. And I've seen pictures of her. And I wonder when those pictures were taken. They might have been taken in the earlier part of the 1900s. I'm not sure when she died. But she has the strangest eyes. I wonder if she had Neptune in the first house. Because they were kind of like, I wish I could find that description from the site that I was looking at. Because it was quite vivid, the way that they talked about it. But they're basically saying that the person can be quite evasive as well with this kind of a look that they're giving. But also, it's going to be otherworldly. Let's put it that way. And, one thing to remember is that the first house can be the appearance, but especially if it's close to the ascendant. If you have Neptune in conjunction with the ascendant, then you're going to have an ethereal demeanor. And this can, take many different forms. This can be like your eyes. It could be that the way you carry yourself is just somehow different, and other people can pick up on that. Speaking of picking up on things, you are going to be highly psychic, to say the least, and if Neptune is in the first house at all. But getting back to this idea of identity and the first house, Neptune here can create this dichotomy, split, whatever you want to call it, and you may feel as if you cannot really reconcile the two. I'll say in general, because one of these sites was saying that you don't care about your identity, but I would beg to differ, because if you have a strong sun sign, in other words, if your sun sign is in a fire element, or even air, if it's in Aquarius in particular, which is very much about being different, being unique, you may find it, but especially with the fire signs, this may be quite a conflict for you. If your sun is in the 10th house, also, because your public reputation is very important to you, and yet you feel like you can't pull it off, that you somehow are too impractical. And when I say impractical, not just in terms of the way that you act in life, but the way that you view life. You're essentially a dreamer, and therefore you're not really concerned about anything that has to do with worldly affairs, whether it be, who am I, what am I going to become in this world, or the practical matters about keeping yourself. Because the first house, we could also say, is the security, in a sense of, like, the first chakra almost, of, like, your basic needs getting met. Like, when you come into this lifetime, what kind of situation do you come into it? And actually, I would say, and it's funny because they're not talking about it from that angle. They're talking about it from the angle of your personality traits or what have you. But I would say that you may have come into this lifetime with a lot of disorder, because Neptune can be like disorder. So, or chaos, that there was addiction in the family. Doesn't mean it stayed that way, but at the very beginning, or there was some kind of something was very confusing in the early years of life. And because of this can lend itself to feeling that this is what life is about. So it kind of imprints itself upon you, and you may, pick up that ball and take it running in your own life. So needless to say, the idea of fantasy and reality get blurred. When Neptune is in the first house, this, again, can come from the influences around you when you first came into this lifetime. And they're always talking about with people who have Neptune in either, the first house, or maybe the 12th house, that you have to be careful about not using substance abuse as a way to escape, because you may be susceptible to that more than other people. This is also true with people who have a prominent Pisces. It's not to say that you're the only one that can have an addiction. It's saying that there may be motivation to want to escape, either because of sensitivity, and in the first house, that feeling of vulnerability and exposure that may kind of make you very secretive in a lot of ways, or mysterious, is how they put it. But I think that I remember reading recently that Pisces is secretive, and I thought, oh, that makes perfect sense. All the water signs, and in essence, you are like a water sign having this in your first house, even if you just want to look at it as the extension of the ascendant. And you want to, the first house is the body. So whether it's any kind of substances, even if it has to do with medicine that you're prescribed from a doctor, certain people are more sensitive to drugs than others. And you might have noticed that already. So you have to take that into account when it comes to what you put into your body. And I suppose you could even say that about food, that you might have, maybe you're very sensitive to allergies or things like that because of just that general, what's that word? Permeability? I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but that ability that Neptune has, it doesn't have any kind of boundaries or barriers. So you think about the immune system, you think about all these areas where it's like the person may feel like they catch things very easily. But here's the thing. I believe that everything begins in the consciousness. So if you're somebody who feels like, I don't know, they didn't mention melancholy here. Pisces or Neptune is going to be very sensitive, let's put it that way. But you can pick up negative vibrations very easily. So it's so important, if you have Neptune in the first house, to choose everything carefully. Choose your environment carefully. Your environment may affect you more than most people. I'm talking about where you live, what type of dwelling. Maybe you're the type of person that is better off living in a house or a very, like a 2-flat where there's not like a lot of people around, because you may feel like you're picking up everybody's energy, and you don't want that because you can't really, maybe you have a hard time distinguishing what is yours and what is somebody else's thoughts. And so the other thing too is people just in general that you associate with. Family members may be hard because you could possibly feel or may be deceived into thinking that they have your best interests at heart. But it really isn't about that. It really is about how do they make you feel. When you leave their presence, when you leave their company, how do they make you feel? If they make you feel agitated, if you spend the next 3 days kind of detoxing emotionally from somebody, be it a parent, a sibling, a cousin, a friend that you've had since forever, but you just notice that you just don't feel that good, and you're just so used to it that it never crosses your mind. But perhaps as you get older, it's becoming more and more obvious to you that this person affects you in a negative way. Then it's up to you to protect yourself. And a spouse, obviously, a partner. And the problem with Neptune is that tendency towards fantasy and escapism, because you may make excuses for that person, but you don't want to really deal with it, and then it just prolongs the agony. So really care about the company that you keep, the environment that you have, the things that, the kind of entertainment that you are taking part in, that you indulge in. Leave no stone unturned. because otherwise you may be walking around in a fog and you won't know why. And you're saying, like, why do I feel this way? There's nothing, like if you're feeling agitated, nothing bad has happened to me. Why do I feel agitated? And then you trace back, oh yes, I just talked to so and so on the phone, and it seems like they're always like, kind of undermining everything that I say. If I say certain plans, they're always second guessing me. It might not just be like a direct insult. There might be subtle things that are happening. But it's up to you, since you are so intuitive, to do this towards yourself, because you're going to have this gift, but whether or not you're able to truly make use of it in a positive way for your own benefit is a different story. So I think I'm going to leave it here. And one thing I want to say too is that you may be, and I don't think that I was really thinking in terms of, it wasn't anything that I read, but I'm wondering if some of you were the scapegoat in your family. Also, when I can't wait to do Neptune in the 4th house, because that could even be more of the case. But in the 1st house as well, I'm just going to say, if you were a victim, now that's an important thing. Yeah, I need to speak on this for a second. If you experienced any kind of abuse in the early years of life, that could leave an imprinting on you. And it is absolutely crucial that you flip that script, because, we all have our different philosophies or beliefs in life. I do believe in the law of attraction. I'm not a cultist. I don't, I just believe that it's generally true. I don't know if it's 100% true. I severely doubt it, but I believe it in a general sense that the thoughts you think create your reality to some degree. And therefore, you don't want to walk around with this mental label that you give yourself saying, I am a victim. And even though you may be, and I do believe we have to grieve that, we have to acknowledge that we're victims and then let go of it and then say, this is not a random chaotic universe. This happened for a reason. There is something to be gained from this. Or, I don't have to continue to be a victim is the important thing. I see how terrible it is to victimize, because I was on the receiving end of this. And I have really learned that this is something that is not good. But I don't have to perpetuate this identity that is not my own anymore. I disavow this identity as a victim, and because it's in the past, it no longer exists, and just put it to bed. Because there are some people who are the victims of abuse, and that becomes their identity. And in the 1st house, when you're lacking an identity to begin with, it may be very easy to glom onto that and think that, oh, good, this is who I am. And it's like a negative thing. You don't want to be that. You don't want to be pitied. You want to be respected in life. And, looking at it from that lens of being the victim is very disempowering at the end of the day. But like I said, part of the healing process may very well be, really immersing yourself on, what it felt like to be in that position in order to fully move on and make peace with everything. Okay, that's what I have for you, and I hope that you enjoyed this. Take care. Bye.